Hey, everybody. It's been a while. I am happy to be back. I am recording a solo episode. I have not done a solo episode of a podcast in a very long time. I've done a couple of interviews, and honestly, it's been more than a year since I released an episode, so I'm sorry about that. But I'm going to get right into it because I'm excited about what I'm talking about today. So, my topic for today is laden with controversy, but I'm okay with that. And the idea that I would like to present to you is that Chappell Roan and Isabel Brown are both right about parenthood. Now, that might sound crazy. That might sound like a wild idea because they have very different perspectives on parenthood. And I'm going to tell you about why I think they both have merit in what they're saying, and they're both wrong in some ways too. So maybe you don't even know who these people are, and I will explain that as well. So Chappell Roan is a very successful pop star, and she is Gen Zer, which I think is really important. She is from Generation Z. And I think that's important to this conversation. And Isabel Brown is a conservative content creator, and she is also Gen Z. And so they have very different ideas, but I'm going to tell you about what I'm here for today. So the reason that this even matters to me, I honestly don't typically spend a whole lot of time talking about like what media personalities are saying or what pop stars have to say. Like, I honestly don't care that much personally. But the reason that I do pay attention to it is because I think that the way that parenthood is being presented in media, the way that people speak about parenthood in the media, it really impacts moms and parents. It impacts the way that they cope with things. It impacts the expectations that they have around parenthood. And I mean, I'm a mom. I am a therapist to moms. I provide training to other providers who provide services for moms. And so, that matters. Like, it's really relevant. It's a huge part of my life, actually. And so, although I don't necessarily speak about it a whole lot publicly, it is something I pay attention to. It's on my mind. And so that's what I'm doing here today, to talk about some things that really stood out to me. And to be honest, this thing with Chappell Roan, I mean, it's been over a year since she said the quote that I'm going to be referencing today, but it's been on my mind ever since. And so I will go ahead and get to that piece here. I'm going to look down a little bit. Those of you who are watching over video rather than listening, you're going to see me look down a little bit, which is not my favorite, but I am going to need to make sure I stay on track with my notes. I also feel like I look very like newscaster. So anyhow, last year around this time, Chappell Roan, who, again, very successful young pop star, was on the Call Her Daddy podcast. And she was explaining why she doesn't want kids. And she was quoted as saying, "All my friends who have kids are in hell." That is quite a statement, by the way. Chappell was heavily criticized by conservatives, obviously, saying things like, she should make new friends. If all of her friends are miserable, she should make new friends. Or really just highlighting that they have bad attitudes, essentially. And talking about Gen Z in general, that perhaps they're self-obsessed and they have bad attitudes, like I said, around parenthood, and that these are the reasons for her friends being in hell. Not giving any merit to the idea that perhaps they are miserable and maybe there are other reasons. And so that's what I want to highlight here about what Chappell has said, is that maybe there are other reasons. Maybe it's beyond them being self-obsessed or simply having bad attitudes. But these people are not alone. Her friends might actually feel like they're in hell. They might actually be miserable, and they are not alone. In fact, perinatal mental health disorders are at an all-time high. If you're not familiar with what that means, perinatal is the period surrounding pregnancy and birth. So we're talking about pregnancy, birth, and postpartum. And this might include perinatal mental health disorders, might include depression, anxiety, and other related disorders that occur during pregnancy and postpartum. What's more, these mental health challenges do not simply go away because somebody is no longer in the postpartum period. In fact, they can last years if left untreated. And so her friends, I don't know if they have babies. I don't know if they have young children. I don't know how old they are, what their stage in life is. But when I hear that somebody is experiencing parenthood as hell, then I do tend to wonder if that's something that's going on for them, if perhaps they are experiencing some level of depression or anxiety or both. And again, like I said, they're not alone in this. And there are let me see. I wanted to share some statistics. That's right. So 1 in 4 women, or 1 in 4 mothers, I should say, will experience a perinatal mental health disorder. And 1 in 10 fathers will experience a perinatal mental health disorder. And that's a lot of people, you all. And these are the people these are the ones that are reported. So they have reported it. It's been recorded in some sort of mental health service they have received, or in some kind of assessment that they've done, or in a poll that they've done. So these ones have been reported, but then there are going to be a lot of people for whom those experiences are not reported. So there are a lot of people struggling in parenthood. And there is some legitimacy to that. Now, there are many, many reasons, many risk factors. I am not going to go into all of them, but I do want to share a couple of risk factors that perhaps could be impacting Gen Z, could be impacting these friends of Chappell Roan, and then kind of connect it a little bit with what Isabel Brown had to say. One significant risk factor is a lack of social support. We live in a highly individualistic society, and child rearing, especially in the early stages, is just not very conducive to an individualistic lifestyle. You've heard it a million times, but it really does take a village to raise a family. New parents need a lot of support. And in more collectivist cultures, in more communal societies, it's built in. There's an expectation that the community will come alongside mama and baby and will help out with things like taking care of the older children and doing things around the home and cooking. And especially in the first 40 days, for example, which there is so much healing that needs to happen in those first 40 days postpartum, first 40 days after birthing a whole human. So much that needs to happen in that time. But then even beyond that time, there is a lot of support that families need. And in these more communal societies, families are really supporting one another. And we just don't see as much of that in the United States. Now, that's not to say that people don't make an effort to help one another out. I've seen a lot of that, actually, but it is different from being genuinely in each other's lives the way that others are in more collectivist cultures versus the individualism that we experience right now, where we still very much live in our separate spaces and spend a lot of time with just our nuclear families. And we don't often allow each other into the hardest parts. And I've seen plenty of moms struggle in those early stages as well with asking for help. And it is hard. I will definitely validate it is hard to ask for help, especially when you don't know exactly what you need. You know, there's always that sort of trite saying that people throw out there. And I think that most of the time people mean it, but they'll say things like, let me know if you need anything. Well, oh my gosh, when you're drowning, like you don't know what to reach out and ask for. And so having those sort of built-in supports, or people who just literally say, hey, I'm going to do this thing. Like, I'm going to bring you a meal. Which day this week is the best? Or I'm going to the grocery store on Wednesday. What can I pick up for you? Or I'm taking my kids to the park. Can I take your older kids with me? You know, those kinds of things are just so, so helpful, and they happen. But like I said, they are not nearly as common as the solo sort of parenting experience. And honestly, I mean, I'm not even talking about single parents, but even 2-parent households still need a lot of help. It's can be very overwhelming to especially have a newborn. But then when you have multiple children and trying to do all the things and getting right back to work, and, just a lot can contribute to that, overwhelm that can contribute to exhaustion and depression and anxiety. And so that also leads me into another significant risk factor, which is lack of financial resources. I do hear a lot of people say that they won't have children because of the financial impact. They feel like they can't afford it. And I am not going to lie to you, it is quite expensive having children. If both parents are working, then you're paying for childcare. And if only one parent is working, then you are relying on only one income. And then there are things like healthcare costs and activities that you might have your children in. And kids need clothes and they need to eat like multiple times a day. It gets really expensive. Even for those who have, quote, good jobs and health insurance through their employers, it's a tough time to be middle class in this country. So the financial strain is real. And it doesn't help, like I said, that most people are trying to do it on their own, that we don't support each other as well as we could otherwise. I also do want to say, Chappell's perspective is based on a limited number of people, and that's not me knocking her perspective. It's just what it is. It's based on what she said is her friends who are parents are miserable. Like I said, that could totally be true, and that's her friends. There are so many people, so many other parents in this country who would not describe their experience as hell. But this is also what happens when we listen to sound bites and then try to judge people just based on that one soundbite, or even worse, try to judge an entire generation based on one soundbite. Soundbites give us little to no context, and they're usually over something controversial, especially when presented in a standalone statement, and then somebody grabs that soundbite and makes like an hour-long commentary on it. I mean, like I'm doing, I suppose, but not. This won't be an hour, but they make this big long commentary on this one comment, and it's just incomplete. Trying to take a brief statement and infer the truth about a person or about their experience from that one little piece is just incomplete. So I want you to keep that in mind while I move into talking about Isabel Brown. About 2 weeks ago, Isabel Brown, a Gen Z conservative content creator, was on stage at CPAC, which is the Conservative Political Action Conference. And Isabel implored people to begin, quote, encouraging your children to grow up and have the courage to get married and have kids, more kids than they can afford before they think they're ready, end quote. Again, lots of controversy around this. I believe the View had a lot to say about it, the ladies of the View. And I am going to start by telling you why I think Isabel's right, but I'm going to tell you why her perspective is also incomplete. So here's why I think Isabel is right. What she said is, I believe, at least in part, in response to the message communicated by Chappell Roan and others in Gen Z. Many will say it's too expensive to have kids and they're not ready. Many express fear of getting married and the commitment involved in marriage and kids. And I believe what she was trying to convey is the idea that it's worth it to do these things anyway, even though it might feel hard or scary or like a really big commitment. And yes, marriage and children are huge commitments and should never be entered into lightly. And it also takes courage. It really does take courage to be so vulnerable as to choose to commit to a person for your whole life, to be so vulnerable as to open yourself up to what takes place when you are a parent. My goodness, the level of vulnerability that you experience in those experiences it does take courage to do those things. So saying, let me see, I hope these things connect. Saying to, quote, have more kids than they can afford, and is likely, I'm adding to that, is likely because so many talk about being unable to afford to have children. So as I mentioned earlier, there is absolutely a financial impact when having children. And I'm not sure that's a reason not to do it, or at least not for everyone. And I really want to clarify what I'm saying here. I can't assume what Isabel meant, but I can guess. I think that she probably was not trying to talk to everyone when she made that statement. So, critics who have spoken about Isabel coming from a place of privilege, and I will be clear, she is. Yes, she is coming from a place of privilege. There's also saying, though, that she's not considering those in poverty or those who lack resources, and not considering all the problems that arise from having children in before people are ready, or having more than people can afford. Again, there is a real financial impact on families who lack resources. Absolutely. And there is a real societal impact as well. Those families need to utilize more social services and government programs. They're at higher risk for crime and substance use and violence. And she really probably was not speaking to that demographic of people. Now, you can have criticisms about that all day long for various reasons. I really do understand what potentially some of the problems are with that. But the thing is that there are also a lot of people in the United States who are somewhere in the middle. Like I said, it's a tough time to be middle class in this country. There are a lot of people who are middle class. And those people, many times, are the people for whom having several children probably would lead to financial strain, but not necessarily to financial ruin. And I think that's what she's getting at there, that there is risk, there is sacrifice potentially, and it does take courage to enter into those things. And I imagine she would also say that it is worth it, as I say, actually. And all of this is part of the problem, again, with judging people based on sound bites. She's not talking to everyone. She can't possibly address every circumstance, especially in her one brief statement that was like a sentence long. Just like Chappell Roan, Isabel's statement is incomplete. What I think Isabel is talking about is that marriage and children require sacrifice, and it's hard, and it's so worth it. I'm sure many people have heard mothers say something along the lines of, motherhood is the hardest and best thing I've ever done. And you might be tired of hearing that. For those who maybe are not parents or who are not really interested in the idea of becoming a parent, you might be tired of hearing that. But the thing is that we say it so much because it's really true. Motherhood is the hardest thing I have ever done, and it really is the best thing I have ever done. And I'm not necessarily here to even talk a ton about that experience, just to give some merit to this idea that things being hard or things being a sacrifice is not necessarily a reason not to do it. Especially then when something that also comes with the potential for so many benefits, something like marriage, as having the honor of partnering with another human for a lifetime, or the joy and privilege of parenting a human and watching them grow into themselves. It's incredible. It's incredible. And I don't want anybody to hear me as saying that everybody should have children. I don't think that, but I do wish some more people were open to it. So if I take both of these quotes, both the quote from Chappell Roan that all of her friends are in hell who have kids, and this quote from Isabel Brown as saying people should be encouraging young people to get married and have a lot of kids. If I put these together and I look at the context and look at the ideas that I have just shared here, I think what I come up with is that there are real challenges to having kids in the world today, especially here in the United States. That's really what I'm talking about. Motherhood in America, obviously. There are risks, to be sure, but I don't think that opting out is the answer. For some people, perhaps, and please don't hear me saying again that I think everybody should have kids. I do not think that. And I especially don't want people having kids who don't want kids. So don't hear that. What I would like to see is more people being open to having kids and also being part of societal change at the same time. I know that's hard. I know that's risky. I do it every day. And I know also a lot of people nobody has the same life as me, but everybody's circumstances are going to be different. Like I've mentioned before, we cannot cover all the bases when we talk about that, but I can talk from experience of a person who has gone through a lot of hard stuff around parenthood. If you know anything about my story, you know I am not just, what's the word? I am not just talking out of my a-hole. I probably shouldn't say that. I am not just blowing smoke. But it is hard and it is worth it. And I would love to see more people willing to take the risk and also be part of societal change at the same time. I would love to see more people creating communities with one another, the communities that they truly desire and the ones that are most supportive and help prevent things like perinatal mental health disorders and help prevent things like financial ruin from having children. I would love to see more people creating resources and programs that support families and, again, minimize those risks. I would love to see people speaking more openly about both the challenges and joys of parenthood. It seems out there on media, like I'm talking about, we hear about one or the other from people. We don't hear a lot of both sides. And really, I mean, it's just got to be, I think, more of the conversations we have with people in person. Not everybody has to get online and say all of their opinions, but having more one-to-one conversations with people about the good things and the hard things and all of it wrapped up together. Man, it's beautiful. It's all really beautiful and messy and hard and good and all of it. And it's just what my husband and I are trying to do. And we do not do this perfectly. I will not pretend about that, but it's what we are trying to do. We are trying to be part of the solution. We are trying to be open about our experiences, about who we are, about the challenges we face, and the incredible joys that come along with having kids, even with, the sacrifices, even with the struggles. It's good. And it's worth it. I also just want to kind of close out by giving a little bit of a secondary message here. My secondary message is that it would be really cool if we could all listen to each other a little more, like really listen to one another. A lot of what happens with these real quick sound bites that we hear from people, all the criticisms about both Chappell Roan and Isabel Brown have been pretty vicious and just genuinely assuming the worst of them. And I just find if we actually listen to people, if we really try to understand, we might really be able to see where they're coming from. We don't have to agree. I don't agree 100% with Chappell Roan. I do not agree 100% with Isabel Brown. And I don't agree necessarily with the way that they respond to the way that I don't necessarily agree with the way that they respond to their perspectives either, but I get it. When I listen to understand, I get it. At least I think I do. I don't know for sure. I didn't get to talk to them personally. I just find that in my life, I have learned that when I can't fully understand why somebody would say or do something, the best place to start is with the most charitable possible explanation. Assuming the best of somebody until or unless I am proved otherwise. And that has worked out pretty well for me. It's another thing that I do not do perfectly, but it is something that I strive to do as often as possible. Assume the most charitable explanation, try and understand, and if I'm proved wrong, okay. If I find out that somebody has terrible motives and they're awful people, okay, I can accept that as true, once I learn about that, but I'm not going to start there. And so I just hope that we as a society could do a little bit more of that and bridge those gaps that we talk about, have more open communication and conversation without being hateful and hurtful to one another. And, as I'm here to talk about parenthood, I hope that it improves parenthood. I hope that it improves motherhood in America and the way that we show up for one another and try to better understand one another. So thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And I hope to connect with you all again soon.